How's it going, y'all? Titan Smash MTG, and today we're back with some more MTGA Standard discussion. Last video, we looked at 10 different Strixhaven decks for Standard, so hopefully y'all enjoyed those and are still enjoying those. I have a lot of fun brewing those kind of things, and even though it's kind of difficult, those videos are just super fun to make. But even though we have a lot of fun looking at new decks, it's important we look at the ones that are already pre-existing, because even when we get all these new fancy toys, we want to use them. In the end, we already have the best decks available brought to us already. We know what those good decks are, so we can't really forget about those. So what we can do is look at each one and see what new toys it gets, what improvements they make, if any, because honestly, some of these I'm about to show you, there's not a single card you really want to change in these, but some of them do get some kind of interesting toys and things that you could possibly swap out. So I think we can look at that and just kind of, predict how these decks do change if they do, and how the meta may change, considering the changes we get here. So let's go ahead, take a look at these decks that are already existing. We're not going to go over every single standard deck already. Basically, I went to MTG Melee and looked at the top 7 or 8 decks in the meta here. So if there's one you didn't want to see, don't blame me, blame MTG Melee, because it wasn't showing up in the top decks there. But I feel like we can look at these and kind of get a good idea of what's going on. One thing important to note about these is, a lot of the decks that exist right now are all ally colored decks. You have Gruul, which red and green are ally colors. You have Dimir, so Dimir is ally colors. All these kind of 2-color decks here, this set for Strixhaven is an enemy colored set. So a lot of these decks really don't get a lot of support because the colors are all kind of off from what we have. Now that doesn't mean new decks can pop up, they're going to be these enemy colors. But as a whole right now, a lot of these decks just don't really get a lot because of that and that alone. But yeah, we'll quit yapping and let's take a look at these decks here. So we'll go down the list here, starting at Sultai Ultimatum. So let's go ahead and get into that. Let's go. Alright, so deck number 1 we'll look at here is Sultai Ultimatum. And honestly, this one actually does get quite a few upgrades. This one probably gets the most upgrades over anything, which is scary because it's already one of the most explosive decks in the format. At least it can go over top of any other deck in the format. Now, I say it gets the best upgrades. Maybe it's not the best, maybe they're not upgrades at all, but it does get a lot of different options for cards to use in here. So, looking at the list we have here, 2 Lemonade, 2 Heartless Ag, nothing I'd really change there from what the standard is. And obviously these decks can kind of go card for card, just alter a little bit. So, bear with me there. Whole playset of Omen of the Sea here. You still want Omen of the Sea in these decks, I believe. A whole playset of Wolfwillow Haven. You have your 1 Valky here. Can always be 2, but obviously you have your Valky to hit to ball off your Ultimatum. Let's look at the first new card here, which is Test of Talents. Instead of the main deck negate in there as a 1-of, I think Test of Talents is just a little bit better than this kind of shell. 1 in a blue instant, counter target instant or sorcery spell, searches controller's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that spell and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled from the hand this way. So the reason you want this, for one, this is a really nice tool for the Ultimatum decks because a lot of times you're going to be kind of, the main thing you want to do in these kind of decks is resolve your Emergent Ultimatum. And here, if they have a negate in the main deck, not only do you counter their negate this way, but you also get to search for any other negates in the hand, or the graveyard, library, all that kind of stuff. Get those negates out of the game for good and not have to worry about them. But you also get to look through their decks, so that if it's not a tournament where it's an open deck list tournament, you can see whatever other counter spells they have and all that kind of thing. Also, if you're in a mirror match, you get to counter their ultimatum, take all their ultimatums out of the game. Now, obviously, this works against you if your opponent's playing this deck and they get you this way. Because we've seen before, anybody who's played the decks knows that if you get your Emergent Ultimatum countered, the deck is not nearly as good as it would usually be. So this deck is both, it's both a good tool for the deck, but also just a great tool against it. But I think this is just a little bit better than the main deck negate, because you're just worried about the instant or sorceries mainly. Like, you don't really worry about the planeswalkers, enchantments that much, artifacts, all that kind of thing. Those are kind of stuff you can get around. So I think Test of Talents can make the addition over negate here. Personal preference kind of thing, and that's the beauty of Sultai Ultimatum, is you have a lot of little flex slots to play with these kind of things. So going back through this list, nothing really changes until you get to the 4-drop slot here, and I think you want to play 2 Baleful Mastery. This is a 3 in a black, so with 4 mana instant, you may pay 1 in a black rather than pay the spell's mana cost. If the 1 in a black cost was paid, opponent draws a card. Exile a target creature or planeswalker. I think this can take the spot of some of the cheaper removal in the deck here. Reason being is, for one, you have a 1 in a black, just exile any target creature or planeswalker, which the deck really, really likes to have. Exile is a big deal. Getting to hit planeswalkers as well is a really big deal here. And the opportunity to be able to do this for 1 in a black if you need to is nice. And even though the opponent can draw a card, if that's the case, that's not as huge a deal in a Sultai, when even though they're drawing a card, it's still probably not going to be nearly as powerful as the top end of what your deck is. And you ramp so well in this deck that this can still just be a 3, by turn 3, you have your Wolfwillow Haven on 2. On turn 3, you just pay the full cost for this, exile target creature or planeswalker, and go about your day. So I think this is a really nice piece of removal for this deck, something the deck's very happy to have, and it's a deck that can pay both costs better than most decks in the format probably can. The last additions we'll talk about here for this deck, and honestly, these are just kind of tester spots here. I think you want to have some kind of split, like a 1-1 split of Elder Gargoyle, I think Vorinclex. The Vorinclex we want to have because we do play, we play the Tibalt and Valky, but I also want to just try one Professor Onyx in here. I think Professor Onyx kind of synergizes really well with what the deck wants to do. You can resolve your Emergent Ultimatum and play this, and then your Magecraft kind of stuff can go to work there. The +1 helps you dig a little bit. The minus helps you just remove a big creature. And if you choose this and Vorinclex, you get the ultimate right away. You probably just win a game between the Vorinclex swinging in and then the -8 doing its thing. So Professor Onyx, I think, is a good one to find here. Again, it's a monocolored spell, so it's able to be hit off Emergent Ultimatum. There's a lot of cool stuff that I see people trying to do with Emergent Ultimatum, but people, you got to remember, and again, I'm really bad at want to forget this too, but Emergent Ultimatum only hits off monocolored spells, so all the big Golgari stuff that you may want to hit, maybe it's good as a one-off just to cast it in here, but it's not hittable off our Ultimatum, and I think that makes it just kind of unplayable. So we're also playing one Jadzi or Jadzai, I'm not sure how to say that name, but Oracle of the Arcavios. This is 6 blue, so an 8 mana creature, human wizard, discard a card, return Jadzi, Oracle of the Arcavios to its owner's hand. Magecraft, whenever you cast or copy an instant sorcery spell, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast it by paying 1 rather than paying its mana cost. If it's a land, put it on the battlefield. So this is a fantastic get off of Emergent Ultimatum. This is one that I think we'll see play for sure. Because late game you hit this off Ultimatum and it's super good. And if you hit this, just if you have any mana to do anything else, you just pay 1 mana and you're potentially casting another Emergent Ultimatum. Or you play a bunch of just big expensive spells in this deck. Getting to pay 1 mana for those is kind of insane. And if you whiff, you're still getting a land on the battlefield, so even that's not bad. Also worth note on the back end of this, Journey to the Oracle is also playable. If you happen to have a land heavy hand, you can keep it, because with this you can pay the 4 mana, put a bunch of lands on the battlefield, and then do your thing. So I think this kind of pulls double duty in this deck, and I think this is a really nice addition to the Sultai Ultimatum plan. So overall, Sultai Ultimatum already one of the best decks in Standard as it is, and it seems like it just gets some new toys to be even more powerful. So though I'm sure there's going to be a lot of cool new decks from Strixhaven, don't take your eyes away from this one, because this one got some pretty cool stuff. Let's look at another. So deck number 2 we have is Temur Adventures, Temur Obaj, and honestly, I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but with this being an adventure shell, you really don't get a lot of new toys for this one. Again, I put 2 Tessa Talon in here of the 2 main deck negates that some people play with this. But honestly, you may not even want that. But I do think Tessa Talon's just a really good spell, because for one, it synergizes really well with Goldspan Dragon. You get to play your Goldspan Dragon, untap, and if they try to counter it, you get to just basically get that counter spell out of the hand forever. But also, if you're in a mirror match or something like that, and someone tries to Alrund's Epiphany you, it's going to be a really good feeling to be able to counter that and search their deck and library. Now, important to note, if they have one Foretold, you can't get around it that way, but that is what it is. Otherwise, not a lot of things changing here. The only other card that I'm trying to play here, and this is just as a one-of instead of the top-end Coma that some of these plays, I'm playing one Galazeth Prismari. A little bit cheaper, so this lowers the overall mana curve of the deck a little bit. Galazeth is a 2 blue and a red, so a 4 mana legendary Elder Dragon. 3/4 flying, whenever it enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. So for one, it's already kind of helping you ramp on the ETBs, which is nice. Artifacts you control have tap, add the 1 mana to any color, spend this mana only to cast instant or sorcery. So this is kind of nice because even if you don't have your Goldspan Dragon out to double your mana production from your treasures, you can still use Galazeth this way to do some things. So it makes you not as reliant on that Goldspan Dragon to get value out of your treasure tokens, which is really nice. I like that it ramps you on ETB, that's really good there. And the 3/4 for 4 is just kind of a solid body already that can fly. So I think this is, just as better than a Coma in the main deck. With this set, we got a lot of good black removal here, which is just really strong against Coma anyways. So I think Galazeth is just a better way to go here. Lower that curve a little bit, help you ramp up to your Goldspan Dragon, to your Alrund's Epiphany, so you can just close the game out a little bit faster. Otherwise, it's the adventure package. You can't really change that very much, so this deck doesn't change a ton. But that's what we got for this one. Let's look at deck number 3. So deck number 3 is Mono Red Snow, and there are literally no changes to this deck. I say no, I did change 2 cards in here, and again, this probably isn't even the right way to do this. I've never been a big fan of Rimrock Knight personally. I know why it's in these decks, I get why it exists, but anybody who's watched my channel for a while, I've just never been high on Rimrock Knight anyways. I want to cut that down to a 2/2 split and do 2 Conspiracy Theorists in this deck. Conspiracy Theorist is a 1 and a red 2/2 human shaman. Whenever Conspiracy Theorist attacks, you may pay 1 and discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So a little bit of looter scooter action in a way, you got to pay for it, but you still get that kind of loot effect and really just get to turn through your library a lot more while still being aggressive, which is nice. Bottom text on this: whenever you discard one or more non-land cards, you may exile one of them from your graveyard. If you do, you may cast it this turn. So say if you have a gold, like a lot of times in this deck, a big thing that happens is I'm kind of early in the game. I have my Goldspan Dragon in hand, but I've only got about 2 mana or so. So a lot of times it's just I don't need that Goldspan Dragon. So with this, you can pay the 1, discard the Goldspan Dragon, and then draw another card that's useful. Then later on in the game, when you actually have that mana for the Goldspan Dragon, you can do Conspiracy Theorist things, get that Goldspan Dragon back, and use it. So while I don't think it's a slam dunk in this deck, honestly, it's the only thing I can really think to change in Mono Red Snow. It's just such a streamlined deck already, and there's not a lot of room for improvement. And with the new cards, nothing really fit in here that was super aggressive or fitting for Mono Red anyways. So maybe you want the 2 Conspiracy Theorists in there. If not, I don't see any other additions this deck really gets. Let's look at another. So speaking of decks that don't really change at all, here's Dimir Rogues. Dimir Rogues has 0 changes. Actual, factual 0. I'm sure there's things you maybe could put in here just to try to be spicy, but honestly, the more I looked at it, like nothing needs changing in here. And thank God, because I don't want to talk about this deck anyway, so let's go ahead and look at another. So the next deck we'll look at here is Mono White Aggro, Mono White Snow, and this one gets a few different things you can do, and honestly, there's some things I don't have in here that you possibly could play. As you'll see from my list here, I don't have Elite Spellbinder in here, but Elite Spellbinder is such a good card. I wouldn't hate you for putting it in here. The reason I didn't put it in here is your 3-drop slots are already kind of congested. You have your Maul of Skyclaves, your Redain, your Skyclave Apparition, and I just don't think you want to congest that anymore with Elite Spellbinder. Because usually on turn 3, if you have your turn 2 creatures like a Seasoned Hallowblade, you almost always want to put that Maul of Skyclaves on there. If you're playing against a board wipe kind of deck, you always want that Redain on there. So I just think Elite Spellbinder wasn't the way to go here with this one. So instead, I'm playing a 2-of Strict Proctor in the 2-drop slot. Strict Proctor is a 1 and a white, 1/3 with flying. Spirit Cleric, whenever a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability to trigger, counter that ability unless the controller pays 2. Now, if you watch my previous video on the new decks of Standard, I have my Mono White Texas deck, and I actually did not include this card. Reason being was that card had a few more ETBs than this one does. If you look at this, Alseid, Selfless Savior, Luminarch Esprit, Seasoned Hallowblade, Redain, I mean, hardly any of these cards actually have ETBs. The only ETB card in this deck is Skyclave Apparition. So that's one of those things that I think the cost of playing Strict Proctor is pretty nice here. Shut off a lot more for the opponent than it's shutting off for us. So I put a 2-of in there for this. I think it's actually a pretty decent card. That 1/3 body can hold down the battlefield against aggro pretty well. And just, again, countering some of these ETBs is pretty nice. Finally, at the very top end here, instead of the 2 Havlar got a battle, I cut that down to just 1 because we have Blade Historian, which essentially does the same thing at the top end. Excuse me, obviously you don't get the, we're cutting out on the equipment doing this also, which hurts a little bit. But with Havlar giving your equipped creatures double strike, I figured Blade Historian just gives everything double strike. And a lot of these bodies actually do really well with that. Redain being a 2/2 double strike means that you can kind of not be as afraid to attack in with it as you would a lot of times. Redain in the air being a 2/3 vigilant double strike is really hard to get by. And then you have things like your Seasoned Hallowblade all of a sudden attacking for 6 damage is really, really nice. And that's not even counting if you have multiple Skyclaves on there, then you're talking even bigger numbers. So Blade Historian just giving everything a double strike I think was enough to make this as a 1-of here. Again, it's a personal thing. If you don't want it, I totally get it. But that's what changes I'd make to this deck. So Mono White, not getting a ton of new changes here, but it does have the versatility to do a few things. So if you have a better way of building this, please let me know. Let's go ahead and look at another deck. Alright, so next deck we're not going to talk about very long because for one, I hate it. I hate its guts. But number 2, it doesn't really get any changes at all. This is Jeskai Cycling. The only card that I would change in this deck, instead of the 2 main deck Riels that some deck play, I would take those out and play 2 Prismari commands. Again, the removal in this set, we got a lot of good removal here, and all that removal hits Riel anyway, so I think that card gets a little bit worse. And it's just as a whole, I don't think it's a super good card in the first place. So instead, I put 2 Prismari command in here. Prismari command, 1 blue and a red instant, choose 2. Deal 2 damage to any target. Target player draws 2 cards and discards 2 cards. Target player creates a treasure token and destroy target artifact. So the destroy target artifact's nice because a lot of times they can use a glass casket to get your flourishing fox or something like that. You can destroy that. Dealing 2 damage to anything is just a nice little piece of removal for some cheaper things if you want to get those out of the way. Target player drawing 2 cards and discarding 2 cards, meaning you, for one, you draw into more cycling cards, you can get rid of some dead cards, but also, say if the next turn you're just going to go for a big Zenith Flare, this helps you discard 2 more cycling cards while still getting to do something else. So while a lot of times you wouldn't want to take your 3 card, your turn 3, you probably want to be cycling 3 cards. With this card, you can still discard 2 of those kind of cycling cards anyways and do some other useful stuff. So I think all those of this are pretty viable for this list, and I think it's just a hair better than a Riel or something like that. Otherwise, wouldn't really touch anything in here. Again, it's cycling, and cycling cards have to cycle, so you can't really change much about it. Let's go ahead and look at one more deck here, and we'll close this up. Let's go. Now, it wouldn't be a video if I didn't talk about Gruul. However, no changes. There's no changes to Gruul Aggro here at the top end. You know, there's a few different ways to build Gruul, whether you're doing the Great Hinge kind of thing, or the Embercleave plan. But Gruul just didn't really get a lot of toys in this new set. Again, Gruul are ally colors, and this is an enemy colored set. The red and green cards both by themselves. There's some things you can maybe put in here, but as a whole, I just don't think it's any improvements already what you got. Again, it's kind of an adventure shell, so you can't really take the adventure creatures out. Your aggressive creatures here are better than aggressive creatures we got in Strixhaven. There's just nothing really changed here. So Gruul Aggro, no changes. Sorry, friends, that's all it is. So those are the current changes I have to all the current decks in the standard meta as it stands right now. If you have different changes you'd make, please let me know in the comments. I'm always curious to hear about those. But as you see, not a ton of changes to make for these decks. Again, I think Sultai is the only one that really gets a lot of changes. But as a whole, just nothing really doing here. And I think that's okay. I think that's a fine thing. Because this deck, you know, hopefully Strixhaven is still sponsoring new archetypes. And as you see here, we already have plenty of existing archetypes that exist and are doing fine anyways. So that's what we got. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget, we got the Strixhaven 2 bundle giveaway. I have that form in the description below. Fill it out, enter that contest. Have a chance to win a Strixhaven bundle. Thanks for watching, y'all. Appreciate the support. Let's go.